Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. You'll see from the screen that we have a jam-packed session, so I know that we do still have attendees joining the virtual session, but I think that we should get going. My name is Linda Godfrey. I'm a principal researcher at the CSIR, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon's webinar. And it's a great pleasure to welcome all of our speakers. We have an excellent lineup of a number of business representatives, representatives from government, from NGOs that will be sharing their wisdom and knowledge with us this afternoon on circular economy business models and business opportunities. This particular webinar event is a joint EU-SA webinar as part of EU Green Week, and also my thanks to our EU to the EU delegation in South Africa for their partnership in the preparation for this afternoon's webinar. With that, I'd like to pass over immediately for the welcome and introductions. First of all, to Ariane Lebat, Councillor for the EU delegation to South Africa. Ariane, to you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Linda, Molweni Nonke, for all of you who are in South Africa. It's a great pleasure for me to be here together with you. So we are here to celebrate circular economy. And you know, the theme of EU Green Week is moving from hope to action. So we are delighted that we are partnering today with CSIR, with Black Business Council, on unpacking the business model that help us move to a circular economy. That's really the main theme of our topic. And I must say, we have organized this seminar jointly with the member states present in South Africa, who are very active in circular economy, notably colleagues from Finland and also from the Netherlands Embassy, amongst others. I look forward to engaging with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariane, for the welcoming introductions. I'd just like to check if we have Mr. Gregory Mofokeng, Vice President of the Black Business Council, as part of the speakers this afternoon. I can't see Gregory on the screen. I'm not sure, Matthew, who's assisting me, if you are able to see Gregory, who's going to be making the second welcome from the Black Business Council.
Sorry, Linda, I don't see him on. I don't think he's joined us as a panelist. I'll also keep a watch out for the attendee list to see if he joins amongst the attendees, and I'll let you know when he arrives.
Wonderful, thank you, Matthew. I think then, so as not to delay the wait, Ariane, I'm going to pass it back to you again, if you don't mind. I think those who are joining the webinar this afternoon will have seen on the welcoming landing page that there's been a slight adjustment to the agenda for this afternoon. Unfortunately, Ariane needs to leave us for an important commitment by 4 o'clock, and she was to address the session on supporting policies. So we've asked Ariane if she can move her session right up to the front and to address that point so that we don't lose it as part of this afternoon's webinar. So just as context, Ariane is currently Councillor for Climate Action, Environment and Agriculture in the EU delegation to South Africa, working notably on the Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa to promote circular economy, global action for biodiversity, agri-food trade and sustainable food systems. In other previous assignments, she worked as economist to unlock sustainable and inclusive growth opportunities in Europe, Latin America and China. So with that, Ariane, I'm going to pass over to you. You're just on mute.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, thank you all to accommodate the policy presentation first as a flip on the head. So the way I want to present to you what we do in Europe, it's basically framed by our European Green Deal. The European Green Deal is really our strategy to become climate neutral, so net zero emission by 2050, but also zero pollution. But fundamentally, it is a growth strategy. So it's really oriented to creating jobs, to creating prosperity, to creating income, livelihoods, and the thriving economic sectors for the decades to come, within the planetary boundaries. That's the whole philosophy, if you like. And quite clearly, in that approach to a growth model for the decades to come, the circular economy plays a fundamental role as a solution and as a way forward. And so therefore, we have already issued our second circular economy action plan that really targets some levers in our economy, an economy of 500 million consumers, you must remember, how to activate, how to catalyze this circular economy business model across the sectors. So how we do that, the various measures in the circular economy action plan we have, they promote sustainable products by design. They want to get rid of products that actually consumers don't want, products that break all the time, that don't do their job as products. They want to put on the market only the products that genuinely bring an improvement to the life of the consumers and the businesses. Secondly, they also want to foster sustainable consumption, not overconsumption as it has happened on the European markets on some sectors. And thirdly, the various measures are aiming for resource used in our economy to be used longer rather than discarded, because this can create more jobs along the way and more value addition. And throughout the different measures we implement, what is fundamental is that we respond to citizen interest. The European Green Deal is such a far-reaching plan that it builds on the demand of our citizens, of our business sectors who wanted a framework, a way to work together towards this sustainable production and consumption goal. And also, as I mentioned, the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan is really a business-minded intervention. So it's connected very closely to a number of other initiatives, I would say, like, for instance, our skilling and reskilling initiative for the industry. It's also very closely connected to our digital market strategy, amongst others. Zooming into specifically what type of regulatory measures we are using in Europe in order to stimulate a faster growth of circular economy business model. Sometimes very clearly we use command and control. That's the case for single-use plastic. This were creating so large costs on our health, on the management of our coastlines, of our oceans, of our rivers, that we simply said the 10 most polluting single-use plastics that actually have easy alternative, they are out. That's why you don't have any longer single-use forks and knives, because you have plenty of other alternatives that business have already ready on the market. And a second big trait of our regulatory package, it's a regulation that is empowering consumers to make clear choices. So we set up independent third-party verification. We set up digital passports for products so that consumers who want to reduce, reuse, or recycle have a clear, transparent information that can enable them to do the choice they want, and where also innovation in the market can happen and be rewarded. And lastly, we of course don't neglect the international dimension, and that's why, for instance, we are starting to ban a certain number of exports outside of the EU, tackling illegal shipments, because that was also a dimension of the circular economy. Our circular economy action plan, as I said, wants really to boost the circular economy business model. So we have zoomed in into key sectors that are using most resources, so that are most problematic in a way, but also have the highest circularity potential. And you see, for instance, we have picked textiles. We have a full strategy that is already out. And the reason I have highlighted here to you, is because we work with South Africa also on a project with your National Clean Production Center to look at how to disseminate green business model in the textile sector. But it's also because it's an example of how we combine, incentive with the regulatory requirement I've just highlighted. A number of incentives, for instance, It's the extended producer responsibility schemes that we are going to introduce for textile with a certain modulation of fees. We've also going to connect it, exactly as I said before, to the digital product passport, whereby the consumer angle can be supported to make choices. Overall, we are very hopeful that this strategy is going to fast create new jobs. I understand from the BBC colleagues there was a particular interest on knowing how certain incentives can help boost business model develop in a circular economy. So in Europe, what we're doing is we are using public finance that is necessarily scarce, where there's a role for public finance. So that is research and innovation, typically. This is happening a lot, for instance, in the construction sector, be it in terms of the design or inventing digital passports that enable you to see all buildings as product banks for building new equipment and reusing the material for other uses. We are using also public resources, public budgets within the regional development plans. So the normal grants that cities or regions are using in Europe now are trying to think how to create a local circular economy. One example of that is, for instance, you see in Sweden, there was the opening of the first world recycling mall in a region that was very deprived, suffering from a lot of youth unemployment. And there was a combination of public and private investments so that SME could grow, and it's working really nicely. And also we bring in the strength of our banks. So the European Investment Bank is our EU bank that is equivalent of your DBSA or IDC or etc. This bank has taken a very high level objective to mainstream climate change and climate neutrality in its portfolio. So it's investing into large scale infrastructural refurbishments. I want to give as an example in Poland, the locomotive stock has been refurbished entirely instead of scrapping and putting a new system in really a circular economic concept. So you see, we try to work at all levels, and very importantly also our business needs to have a solid, clear, transparent, fair business environment so that themselves they can invest. And I've given here the example of Philips, but there's many other companies. So Philips is investing, for instance, for its medical equipment innovation into refurbishing, into developing their business as services instead of just pushing more goods, also integrating circular economy model. Finally, importantly for the EU, we are not there to project our standards. We are there to discuss and to develop it together with our partners. That's why we are together a founding member of the Global Alliance of Circular Economy. And that's why we have joined as supporter the African Circular Economy Alliance, because we really want to see the circular economy being a global phenomenon very fast as part of our trade with key partners like South Africa as well. So we want to define together. I look forward to seeing all the business model, and I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariane, for providing those insights, and certainly a lot to think about in terms of how we as South Africa as well create that right enabling environment. And things that you've mentioned, for example, like demonstration projects and investment in R&D. So look forward to seeing how we can take a lot of this forward. Thank you for your welcome, and for those that have joined us while Ariane was making her presentation, you will have noticed that we needed to shift the policy presentation slightly forward in the agenda, because unfortunately Ariane is going to be leaving us during the course of this afternoon. So if you do have any specific questions with regards to her presentation, I'll ask you just to pop it into the Q&A, and hopefully Ariane will be able to address some of your questions online virtually before she does leave us. With that, then, I'd like to pass over to Mr. Gregory Mofokeng, who is the Vice President for the Black Business Council, to also make welcoming comments on behalf of the BBC. Thank you, Mr. Mofokeng.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm trying to share my presentation. I don't know if I'm able to, am I unable to do that?
You should be able to. If there's a problem, Matthew, who's assisting us, will certainly make sure that you have rights to share. There we go, it's appearing.
Thank you very much, colleagues. My
If you
name
just
is...
Sorry, Greg, if you can just pop it onto full screen mode for us.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, colleagues, a very good afternoon to you. And as already introduced, my name is Gregory Mufugeng, and I'm here representing the Black Business Council in my capacity as the Vice President responsible for business. And let me once again thank the organizers of this webinar for extending an invitation to us to come and present who we are and to also share a few thoughts around the circular economy and where it is headed as far as our country in particular is concerned. Firstly, let me just tell you a little bit about the Black Business Council. We are an independent membership-based organization, and we represent business organizations, chambers, and corporates within the South African business landscape. We are by no means exclusively focused on servicing Black companies. White-owned companies are also members, as long as they obviously support the transformation agenda of the BBC. And you know, the unique proposition, of course, of the BBC is that we represent both you know, members in the business fraternity as well as the professionals. Our vision is for a transformed economy that is led by Black-owned, small, medium, and large businesses who are seen as drivers of economic growth and job creation. So we do want to see a transformed economy that represents the demographics of the country. And of course, we are very much aligned with the vision that our government has to see a significant economic growth so that we can be able you know, to create the necessary jobs for our people and to see our countries prosper economically and in other areas. Our mission is obviously to unite all you know, affiliates under this common vision that I've just shared with you, and obviously to ensure that we play a very significant role in terms of policy positions, research, and thought leadership in the country. And of course, as the Black Business Council, as I said earlier, we do represent a variety of players within the South African business landscape. And we want to make sure that, in particular, Black businesses play a very central role as far as economic growth and participation is concerned. In terms of institutional alignment, just a snapshot, we have ourselves at the top as the mother body of Black businesses in the country. We have organized professionals, as I said, that's the unique proposition that we have compared to other business organizations in the country. We also have organized business and corporates. And under these respective membership categories, we have several associations that come under the BBC, all in all, around 52 of them that come under the BBC, and we have quite a significant number of corporates as well that join the BBC directly as corporates and not through the member organizations. Now, colleagues, in terms of the circular economy itself, I think it's very important that you know, we share a couple of thoughts from the BBC perspective. One is that obviously we have seen regulatory gaps coming from our government. I think, you know, in the early days, especially when one looks at what was happening in the tires sector, you know, we had Redisa that was given an opportunity, you know, to be active in that space. However, you know, due to, you know, this regulatory uncertainties, we had government coming in and essentially revoking their license and positioning the department to directly take a lead in terms of tire recycling, the tire recycling sector. And we've seen that that model has not worked so well. And what we are gathering in our engagements with our government is that even when it comes to other sectors, this is a similar kind of model that they want to implement. And obviously, we are going to be very active in terms of engaging government to obviously influence the thinking and the direction that they're taking, to say that we do not think that the current direction that the department is taking will work, when it comes to other industries. And I think we are on course through our various committees at the BBC who are actually looking at this. We do have a circular economy a committee that is set up specifically to guide the BBC as far as this matter is concerned. We look at the circular economy as very critical going forward. Number one, we understand that from a job creation perspective, it can create a significant amount of jobs for our people. As we all know, sitting in this webinar, that our job figures don't look good at all. We did have the reports coming from Stats SA yesterday. Although we have managed to create a few thousand jobs, it is by no means sufficient. We need to create a significant number of jobs in their millions. And we think that the circular economy will play a significant role in that. What we do need is, again, regulatory certainty. We do need models that work, because we just think that our government has been ill-advised, especially with regards to the current model that they are implementing when it comes to tire recycling. So we look forward to working together with our government and our European partners, by the way, because I think when you look at what has happened in Europe, there's been greater advances as far as the circular economy is concerned. And we do look forward to partnering with our European partners so that we can be able to learn best practices and implement them here at home, so that we can be able to have a very thriving circular economy. So on the jobs front, we are hoping that that job creation will happen. Number two, of course, everybody is now concerned with the green agenda. And we obviously do want to make sure that we make our contribution as a country towards making sure that we reduce emissions. And so we do know that the circular economy does play a significant role as far as that is concerned. And we look forward to the reduction of our mining activity going forward, so that we can then be able to rely on recycling the existing materials and still be able to live normal lives. Of course, from the stats that we have as South Africa, when one looks at the global emitters, we are obviously one of those that are counted amongst the top emitters globally, and we are hoping that through measures such as the circular economy, we will be able to reduce the emissions that we are emitting currently as a country. Number three, it's about transformation. Our economy is still very much dominated by white-owned businesses. And unfortunately, when you look at the structure of our economy as well, we have a lot of oligopoly players in terms of the number of companies that are active in each sector. So if you go into studying each and every sector of the economy, you will see that there is only a few players that completely dominate that sector at the top. And we have also just been looking at the report of the Competition Commission as far as that is concerned. They have released a report in terms of market concentration. And it is clear from that report that each and every sector has got a few players that are dominating the sector. And we do want to make sure that that is not the case going forward. And we're hoping that the circular economy as a new economy essentially will assist us in making sure that we don't have this market concentration in few companies as we go ahead. And of course, that will open up the space for many more players, including emerging companies that are Black-owned, women-owned, youth-owned, so that they can also have meaningful participation in the economy. Lastly, colleagues, we are very much concerned about the slow pace of economic growth in our country. The current estimate is that in the current fiscal year, the economy will grow only by 2%, which is wholly inadequate if one looks at the challenges that we are facing as a country, especially challenges around the high unemployment figures that we are having. So we are looking at the circular economy as one of those sectors that can then enable us to register meaningful economic growth and make sure that as a country we are able to have an economy that is able to serve its citizens and to be able to create jobs for our people. So in a nutshell, colleagues, that's who we are, and that is our thinking as far as the circular economy is concerned. We look forward to hearing more from some of our members that are on this platform and some of the partners that are there that will be partnering with the BBC and its members in the realization of ensuring that the circular economy is a thriving economy in our country. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much for those welcoming and opening comments, Gregory, and for stressing not only the importance of South Africa transitioning to a more circular economy, but also the urgency in doing that. And as you said, we need to learn and we need to fast track that implementation as opposed to perhaps reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch. So thank you for those comments. So with that, I think if you can unshare on your side, I'm going to share on mine because not only am I going to try and moderate, but I'm also going to try and present in terms of setting the scene. So let me see if I can do that now and share my screen with everyone. There we go. Hopefully everyone should be able to see that. Perfect. So I would like to set the scene for this afternoon's webinar in terms of, so what is the circular economy, why are we here today, and why does the circular economy provide us with an opportunity in terms of businesses? If for any reason my slides don't progress, please also let me know. So I always start my presentations around the circular economy with this slide, which starts off by saying what the circular economy is not. And I think probably one of the biggest misconceptions about the circular economy is that it's about waste management. So the circular economy is not only about waste, and the circular economy is certainly not a synonym for waste recycling. We see this used very often. So if it's not only about waste, if it's not about waste, if it's not about waste recycling, what is the circular economy? The circular economy is essentially about sustainable resource management. It's about decoupling economic growth from the use of resources, whether that be energy, water, materials, by using those resources more effectively. And in fact, I would argue that the circular economy is actually about national resource security in support of socio-economic development through sustainable resource utilization. We saw, for example, the impact that the droughts had in the Western and Eastern Cape in terms of water insecurity, the impact that had not only on households but on businesses. We've seen the impact of energy insecurity with the ongoing load shedding we've had in South Africa since around 2007, 2008, and again the impact that that has had on business. So how do we as a country use our resources more sustainably to support development? Over the past decade or so, there have probably been three main drivers behind a circular economy transition. And this is always one of the questions that I get asked. Why should South Africa adopt a circular economy? Is this not just a global north idea? You know, what has this got to do with developing countries? What has it got to do with Africa, or what has it got to do with South Africa? And these three drivers, the first one, which sort of started the discussion largely, was very much around resource demand and resource scarcity. So we see, for example, in the EU, the critical raw materials. Back in 2011, I think there were 14 raw materials that were identified that were critical to the economic development of the EU region, but perhaps weren't in the ground within the EU. And it was a question then in terms of how do we get access to those resources to ensure economic security. That then changed slightly to, as a driver, the opportunity for circular interventions to address climate change as a climate mitigation action. And we see, for example, the figure on the right-hand side, which comes from the International Resources Panel, which shows that around about 50% of climate impacts, 90% of water stress, and 90% of biodiversity loss comes from the extraction and processing of resources. So if we can decouple growth from resource consumption, if we can use resources more efficiently, we have the opportunity to address these big global challenges that are facing us. The third driver is one that we've seen emerge over the last 2 years, which is around the opportunity for a circular economy transition as part of an economic recovery, a post-COVID economic recovery. And I'd like to add a fourth one to this, in that I think particularly of relevance to South Africa is a circular economy transition provides us with an opportunity to address the big social challenges facing our country, not only in terms of jobs, but if you think, for example, the need for improved housing, the need for access to electricity. I think something like 500 million people in sub-Saharan Africa don't have access to electricity. What are those figures for South Africa? How do we address these major social challenges facing the country, which are likely to be highly resource intensive, in a more sustainable manner? So I think absolutely the fourth driver of being particular relevance to South Africa. So how circular is the South African economy? This was a study that the Department of Science and Innovation funded through the University of Cape Town, which showed that the South African economy is only around 7% circular, most of that due to ecological cycling. And you can see from the material flow analysis on the left-hand side is that, as confirmed, we have this very extractives-based economy. Mining makes up around about 8% of our GDP. We mine, we extract, we export, with very little beneficiation of those resources locally. Very large throughputs in terms of energy emissions, our coal-based energy system, for example. Very large throughputs of solid and liquid waste streams. Unfortunately, very little investment of our resources in our own stock building. So that would be, for example, how we use our resources to make buildings, railways, roads, infrastructure, for example. So by global comparisons, very little in terms of actual local stock building, which really makes us ask this question: is South Africa using its resources in the best interests of its people? And then finally, you can see the very tiny little line which shows the level of reuse and recycling, which makes up that only 7% circularity of the South African economy. So a lot that we need to do to improve circularity, to reduce this wasteful use of resources, to address issues of local beneficiation, and really how we use our resources as a country. So where are the circular economy opportunities for South Africa? So the first thing that we asked ourselves was, where are these resource intensive aspects of the South African economy? Where are we mostly using our materials, our energy, our water? And we focused in, as an organization, as the CSIR, we focused in on these 6 particular areas: mining, agriculture, manufacturing, our economic infrastructure in terms of energy and water, our human settlements, our cities and towns, and mobility, to really try to explore in more detail where we see circular interventions that can support South Africa's future transition to a circular economy, but also socio-economic development. I'm not going to go into the details of all of these. We've published a lot of this work as 8 short briefing notes, and I've provided the URL down at the bottom where you can find these, you can read them. They're short little 4-page documents which give an introduction to the circular economy in each of these areas. We also then had the opportunity to do a deep dive into 3 specific areas: mining, agriculture, and manufacturing. And those reports are also publicly available on the same website, circulareconomy.co.za/CSIR. So what I'm going to do now is just very, very quickly take you through at a headline level where we see some of these opportunities in the different sectors. So there are 3 principles that essentially apply to the circular economy. The first principle is, how do we design out waste? The second, how do we keep materials in use? And the third, how do we regenerate natural systems? And for each of these, you'll see that there are specific opportunities. So for example, in keeping materials in use, how do we reduce, reuse, recycle various waste streams or equipment at end of life? How do we look at things like renewable energy in terms of natural, regenerating natural systems? Now, for every single one of these bullet points, behind them is a business opportunity. Behind them is an opportunity to create jobs or improve livelihoods. The other thing about mining as well is that the opportunity in the mining sector is not only to address resource efficiency, but as we transition to other technologies in other sectors, so as we adopt renewable energy technologies or as we transition to electric vehicles, there is an opportunity for the South African mining sector in terms of supply of these specific minerals and metals into both the local and global economy. If you look at the agricultural sector, so how do we actually improve food security through more circular agriculture? How do we adopt regenerative agricultural practices? I've highlighted in red there 2 areas where we're going to hear something about a little bit later. So the sharing economy, for example, the regenerative agriculture. How do we look at things like precision farming, that we use less water, less fertilizer, less energy in the production of food? How do we look at sharing economy models where farmers can get access to high technology equipment, but not necessarily through an ownership-based model? How do we return nutrients to agricultural systems? Is there opportunity to recover high-value products from waste streams such as agricultural biomass through biorefinery technologies? So again, a lot of examples that can be applied in the agricultural sector as well. When it comes to manufacturing, how do we create a more globally competitive South African manufacturing sector through a more circular economy? So starting with design, how do we redesign products, for example, to be more circular, that they can be dismantled or repaired or refurbished or remanufactured at end of first life or second life? Sharing economy models. How do we adopt innovative technologies like additive manufacturing, which we know can be less resource intensive and don't necessarily require significant stock to be held by any company? In terms of keeping materials in use, opportunities for remanufacture, refurbish, repair, and so much opportunity in that space as well for South Africa. A lot of that currently happening informally, but how do we support perhaps those informal sectors or integrate those informal actors into the economy to really build out this capability? How do we transition to green energy to support our manufacturing sector, whether it be solar, wind, hydrogen, the opportunities there given the current constraints on our energy and electricity systems? When it comes to our cities and towns, these are probably the largest consumers of resources. If you just think about the amount of resources that enter and leave a city every single day, the amount of food that needs to be moved into cities daily. So how do we, for example, design and build more energy efficient housing? How do we look at more compact cities to improve mobility between home and workplace, more pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods? These all have issues to do with how we use our resources within our cities and towns. How do we look at circular construction value chains in terms of things like construction and demolition waste, or circular organics in terms of the food waste, the garden waste we're producing within our cities and towns? Similarly, how do we encourage more renewable energy or green technologies to regenerate natural systems within our urban settings? So much opportunity around, for example, bringing our food production closer to our cities through things like urban gardens to improve access to food and food security. In terms of mobility, how we move things around in our country, so much of our products are moved by road, which are incredibly resource intensive, as well as placing huge strain on our road infrastructure. Is there opportunity to get goods and services to people in a more resource efficient way? So things like shared and multimodal mobility, increased use of zero emission mobility. Certainly the one thing that the pandemic has done is to disrupt how we work. So things like remote and flexible working, will these stick beyond the pandemic in terms of changing the landscape around mobility? Scaling up things like vehicle remanufacturing. So as the rest of the world moves towards more e-mobility and shared mobility, it's expected that developing countries may lag behind. So is there an opportunity for South Africa to lead, for example, in remanufacturing of internal combustion engine vehicles during that transition period. Things like infrastructure design, also, how do we design things for greater circularity in our mobility sector? And then also in terms of mobility, really importantly, renewable energy, again, the hydrogen economy, really important component that around decoupling our mobility from energy systems, just given the impact that that has as well from a climate perspective. Our water, we know that we're a water-stressed country. So again, how do we decouple our development from water consumption? The agricultural sector is the current biggest user of water in South Africa. So how do we grow our food in a more sustainable way that requires less water? Linking back to what I presented earlier, things like precision agriculture, regenerative farming. How do we look at return flows of wastewater? So you can see just so many opportunities that are not necessarily about waste, but about how we use our resources. And as I said, behind every single one of these, there's a business opportunity. But that business opportunity is dependent on us having the right enabling environment, an environment that will allow business to thrive and to develop in this space. And then finally, around our energy demand through more circularity. So things like energy efficiency, a lot has been done in that space already. But also in terms of how we manufacture and produce energy technologies, what is going to be the impact if we try to put solar panels on every single house, whether it be in urban or rural? Not only the demand for resources, but how do we manage those products at end of life? So we also need to think differently around how we transition our energy system. How do we use waste to generate energy as well? Things like biogas recovery from some of our organic waste streams. And then also in terms of regenerating natural systems, the opportunities there. So many different business opportunities, I'm including this particular slide. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. We will be sharing these slides afterwards. But again, different business models, whether it be as product as service or the sharing economy. There's a very strong economic and business case to be made for South Africa to transition to a circular economy. We've seen a large number of companies, both locally and internationally, make a commitment around transition, whether it be in circular design, circular supply chains. We've seen the disruption to supply chains during the pandemic, for example. So how do we address that risk through more circular supply chains, resource efficiency? And in fact, I'll argue that there is significant opportunity for disruptors in this space. Businesses that don't transition, I think, to a circular economy will face risk, but equally, there's opportunity for new businesses, for disruptors in this space, and certainly there's opportunity for small businesses as well. So my concluding thoughts before we actually move into seeing what some of these business opportunities are, if there are only just a few take-home messages today, it's to remember that the circular economy is not about waste management, but about sustainable resource management. It calls for disruption and it calls for innovation, and that's the exciting part. It requires a change in mindset about how we view and how we use our resources as a country. My point I made earlier, are we using our resources in the best interest of our people? Transitioning South Africa to a more circular economy creates opportunities for new businesses and new business models. But I do believe that transitioning South Africa to a more circular economy also provides us with an opportunity to address the major social challenges that are facing us as a country. Thank you very much. Perfect. I've never been facilitator and moderator of myself. So with that, I'm going to move us straight into the exciting part of today's discussion, which is around the innovative business models. And our first presenter for this afternoon's session in that space is around sharing models. Maria Hughes, a global cooperation specialist at CSIR. Maria is from CSIR International. Her work focuses on program development for the World Circular Economy Forum in cooperation with national and international stakeholders. She has worked with inspiring circular economy businesses from around the globe and believes in the business opportunities that lie ahead in a circular economy. Maria, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you to share your thoughts and ideas around the sharing economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, for the introduction and for the earlier presentations. It's very much kind of an excellent setting the scene by you and by Ariane. I will start by sharing my screen. I believe you can see it now. Is it so?
Perfect. Thank you.
Very good. So indeed, hello everyone, and thank you for having me here. I'm really happy to be part of this session, and as already spoken or kind of came up in my in the introduction, I find the interesting in seeking for the circular economy business model, the business opportunities that lie ahead in a circular economy. So not only talking about the necessity to transit to a circular economy, but actually what's the opportunity that lies ahead. But before actually going too deep into my topic, I'll actually start with a quick overview of the Finnish Innovation Fund CSIR, which I represent and where I currently work on circular economy issues. Then I'll kind of dive a bit deeper into sharing models from the perspective of how CSIR has worked on circular economy business models through actually a couple of tangible business cases, both from Europe and from South Africa. And then finally, actually tying it down a bit to the presentation that Ariane gave earlier today, I'll then share some points of the enabling environment that is needed for scaling circular business models. Great. So CSIR, the Finnish Innovation Fund, was founded about 50 years ago, and it was a kind of a 50th anniversary gift for Finland from the Finnish Parliament. We are an independent future house that aim to build a successful and sustainable Finland of tomorrow. And now you think, oh, well, why Finland? What's the question here? But of course, when talking about sustainability, it's a global matter, and therefore we find it extremely important to work actively within our international networks to support the global transition to a sustainable future. Kind of a core question around we work is how do we guarantee a fair future for everyone if the only thing that we know for sure is that everything will change? CSIR works on 3 thematic areas. First of all, safeguarding an inclusive democracy, building a fair data economy, and ensuring a sustainable future through sustainability solutions, which is my background also, or my place of work. Regarding sustainability solutions, kind of our goal is, or the center of our thinking is building a future-proof and sustainable society. And with this in mind, we try to strengthen the biodiversity and accelerate the ecological reconstruction. A crucial part of the sustainability tomorrow, of a sustainable tomorrow, is actually facilitating the economic transformation, and that's where the circular economy comes to place, just as has been described earlier. CSIR has worked on the circular economy since about 2014, and we were facilitating the development of the world's first national circular economy roadmap in 2016. In 2017, CSIR, the Finnish government, and a number of international partners organized the first World Circular Economy Forum, which will now actually this year be held for the first time in Africa in late 2022. I'll talk a bit more about that later. So, well, we already have heard a very good presentation of circular economy, so I won't go very deep there, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the perspective of the circular economy actually being a tool and a necessity for a sustainable tomorrow, but also the opportunity. I really fully echo what was earlier said about the circular economy not being only about waste management and recycling. Then at the same time as the environmental challenges that our planet currently faces actually threaten human well-being, we really must seek for solutions to address these challenges. And here, circular economy is part of the solution. Shifting to a circular economy indeed calls for a fundamental change in our entire mindset, from what we produce, from the way we produce materials and goods, to how we use them. Rather than producing more and more goods in a circular economy, we really get more value from what we have, and we keep that value in the economy for as long as possible through smarter design, digital solutions, and a shift from owning products to using services. Today is about business opportunities, and I'm really I'm keen to hear about the presentations later on from businesses actually working firsthand with on circular business models. But as representing a think tank, what I can actually do is shed some light on one of the circular business models, sharing models, through some tangible examples. CSIR has actually compiled lists of inspiring circular economy solutions from around the globe and Finland, and we are actually currently working on a similar list from Africa in collaboration with Footprints Africa. I'll present a couple of examples of sharing models from from South Africa that are from a database of circular economy solutions that Footprints Africa has compiled. So today is about the opportunities that the circular economy provides, and the transition really requires a fundamental change in our mindset. And in a way, one of these things, also what Linda also mentioned, is to rethink our ownership on a business level and on an individual level. And when you look at sharing models, that I'll be definitely especially diving into, the idea behind this is actually quite a lot around ownership. Who owns the products we use? How does the difference in ownership actually incentivize towards reduced use of materials? For companies with sharing models actually provide opportunities for new growth. Sharing models such as sharing platforms and products as services build continuous customers relationships and improve resource use as they incentivize for longer lifespans and repairability, for example. I will actually now a bit of a difference compared to the previous presentation. I'll be looking at sharing models also from a perspective of sharing platforms and products as services, which in the end somewhat facilitate the change in ownership models. But if we first look at sharing platforms, the circular transition, so digital-based platforms are actually used to promote increased use of goods and resources and the extension of their life cycle by, for example, renting and selling products, sharing them and reusing them. In some cases, the ownership of products might change through the platform, and in some cases it doesn't. Sharing platforms can serve both businesses and individuals. And actually a very good example that was brought up earlier is for example, an example from the agricultural sector, how renting farming equipment can actually make it accessible, more accessible for more people. As a first example of a sharing platform, I actually have an example from the UK, Olio. Olio connects neighbors with each other and with local businesses so that surplus food can be shared and not thrown away. In this way, they can reduce food waste from households, which is actually the biggest source of food waste at the moment. And in this way, the solution has a positive impact, of course, on the environment. It also increases communality within neighborhoods, and in that way, and does to some extent play a role regarding food security. Olio is quite it's scaled. It's quite impressive how well it is scaled. So it has been active for about 6 years and it currently operates in 62 countries and has almost 6 million people using the application. It is actually also active in South Africa. Then going from a very scaled solution to one still in development, let's gear down to DigiYard, which is still very much in a development phase. They are a South African-based startup that is aiming to tackle the problem of construction waste by that end up in a landfill by selling materials from construction sites to for those in need. Based on pilots that they have conducted, there's actually a strong potential to increase the accessibility and affordability of construction materials through their platform while reducing waste that would otherwise end up at a landfill. In addition to sharing platforms, I really wanted to highlight the other ownership differences on ownership models from a product as a service perspective, because whereas in sharing platforms, the platforms actually operate as a facilitator, as a marketplace, often for products. When businesses that provide products as services to individuals or businesses do so instead of selling the products, their incentive there is actually to provide better quality products that last longer, are repairable, and in that way also reduce resource consumption. Products and services are also beneficial for the customers because the financial risk borne by the customer is reduced, it remains with the owner, and the use of the product is more flexible, and at the same time the end user does not need to worry about repairs and maintenance. This can also be seen as a bit of a indirect sharing model, where in the end the sharing is facilitated by the owner of the product, so the service provider. Here, my first example is from South Africa. iDrop Water provides affordable drinking water for its customers, while at the same time minimizing plastic waste from bottled water. So one could say it's kind of it sells refills paid by the liter, which means that instead of buying water bottles, the customer pays for the refills and does not, and they can refill existing bottles instead of discarding them. My final business example is from Finland, Lindström, which is actually one of the Finland's oldest companies, as it has started already in 1848. So it hasn't always been strongly circular, but they have successfully adopted a very circular approach in providing durable textiles as a service. For example, workwear for companies. They lead on producing products that really meet the needs of their customers, while making them also as durable as possible. The customer buys the service, and Lindström provides the products, the workwear, and the maintenance of the products, and then replaces them when needed. This reduces the need for increased natural resources or increased material consumption, but then at the same time, it also supports them in ensures that the products at the end of their life are managed properly. So indeed, I hope that kind of I was able to present that there really is a strong case in favor of sharing models, and they are scaling. But however, one must say that no change will happen without enablers. And that's why I'll finish my presentation by bringing up some core enabling actors that are crucial when scaling sharing models. The findings here are actually based on work that CSIR has done in the last years regarding kind of really looking at the potential in rethinking ownership. So it's clear that we need incentives such as policies that guide companies to engage more in producer ownership models, such as and sharing models. In addition, we need sustainable product design and material consumption. Product design is actually extremely crucial because even up to 80% of the environmental impact of a product is determined at its design phase. Naturally, also funding plays an important role, and new funding models are needed. Sharing models are often pioneers in their sectors, which means that the understanding of their business logic, the added value, and is still a bit of a question, and it might be challenging to predict their near time operation. Therefore, we need success cases like the ones I presented to really tell out the story, to explain the idea behind them, as well as clear messaging of the business potential that lies within these models. Sharing models also, to some extent, need a shift in the mindset, both among the employees and consumers. Ensuring circular economy in education, both on all levels, is definitely important to increase this understanding. In addition, increasing customer awareness in different ways to really showcase the added value that sharing models bring to them has to be clearly set out to be driving the behavioral change from owning to sharing. Ariane provided a very good presentation on the European Green Deal, so as a kind of a core example of current policy developments in Europe. So I will not go very deep here, but I do want to encourage you to think of how, in the end, the initiatives around the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan in many ways will benefit the scaling of sharing models throughout the business, throughout businesses in Europe and also for abroad. Ariane spoke about products lasting longer, being repairable, and then at the same time having more data available about them. And actually, all of these are in support of scaling business models that are based on sharing. So this is, in a way, I think, how to finalize it. The sustainable products and services really are actually becoming a norm in the EU and hopefully also on a global level. And therefore, the opportunity that lies within them for businesses is there, and the movement is going on. Now, before ending my presentation, I would, as I mentioned earlier on, I would like to bring up the next World Circular Economy Forum, which will be held at the end of this year in Kigali, Rwanda, and hybridly and in different parts of Africa. Circular solutions and opportunities that lie within the circular economy will be really central around the WCF 2022, and therefore I do hope to see you either live or online during the forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Yeah, I think we're certainly incredibly excited that the next World Circular Economy Forum event is coming to the African continent. A part of me is a little bit jealous that it's going to Rwanda and not South Africa, but at least it's on the continent, so that's exciting. I've asked delegates who are joining us online to pop their questions into the Q&A function, so you can also keep an eye on that in case there's anything that you want to answer. In the 2 minutes that we have before I need to move over to the next speaker, I think maybe just a question from my side or and combined with a comment. I remember sitting in a workshop about 2 years ago where we had EU delegates in South Africa, and one of the speakers said, and it stuck with me ever since, you have the right to own nothing. And it kind of blew my mind. Because everything that we're exposed to every single day is trying to convince us of exactly the opposite. And I believe that this sharing model provides us with opportunities to actually get goods and services to people in South Africa that perhaps previously could never afford to. So I may not be able to afford a washing machine, but I could lease a washing machine and pay per wash kind of thing. And I remember a representative from a youth group asked me the question, so what does the circular economy have to offer the youth? And I think that, we have to think of it in the way that think about every single thing that you use in a day, and could you access it in a different way that's not an ownership-based way? And just that in itself starts to go, okay, fine. So do I need to own the clothes that I wear? And we're seeing companies start up in South Africa now doing leasing. So I can rent my winter wardrobe and at the end, take it back. We see it a lot, especially for babies' clothing, where kids just grow out of clothing so quickly. So why should I buy it? But I think that there's obviously a very strong potential cultural obstacle that one has to overcome because of the fact that it's just so ingrained in us that we need to own things. And for example, when I lecture to my students, they go, "Ugh, I don't want to wear somebody else's clothing," even though it sounds like a fantastic idea and we can make clothes that last longer. So there's that aspect. But also, I do believe that one of the biggest potential risks to sharing business models is the issue of crime in South Africa. So I'm always amazed that when I go to the US or Europe, I can literally I can book a vehicle. I can find one anywhere. With the app, I can find it and I can book it for the day and I can use it. And at the end of the day, I just leave it somewhere. Or I can rent a bicycle and I can ride around the city on the bicycle. But I kind of think, if that car stood long enough in South Africa, it wouldn't be there tomorrow. So I think that crime is another major obstacle. And I think, again, there's an opportunity in that. There are probably innovative IT mechanisms, that one can build in to address issues around crime. But how are countries addressing these kind of cultural issues around sharing business models, which I believe could be a major obstacle to their transition? Sorry, that was a really long question.
No, well, first of all, I can echo the kind of the thinking of we have to start to learn that our ultimate goal is not to own something, and only in the meantime do we lease it until we can afford to own it, which is easily kind of the mindset. So that I completely agree. The point of crime is definitely something that, or kind of the societal environment for sharing models is definitely something that, for example, the meal, speaking from a strongly European perspective, cannot address the kind of the issue of crime in South Africa. Though I must say that when talking about kind of the platform economy of Airbnb, of Uber, these global platforms, we know about the problems there. We know about the crime. We know about the workers' kind of challenges in ensuring workers' rights regarding the employees, the drivers. Then at the same time, how does it impact urban development? So this is definitely something that that I think what is important is identifying when scaling these is to identify the cultural context where we are, and actually trying to initiate policies in advance that support that actually close out these loopholes that we can see actually with the challenges that these global platforms have provided from a social perspective. So that is, I think, kind of on an overall level is definitely the way, possibly around crime, having strong security kind of checking of background checks of users automatically might be an approach, but it definitely exactly bringing it to the certain geographic and cultural context in a way that it also feeds. People in Finland might be willing to share products that people in South Africa would never think of sharing, and vice versa. And that also is a thing to keep in mind.
Thank you so much, Maria. I really appreciate that. As I said, have a look if there are any questions in the Q&A that are directed to you. Also, if you think that there's anything useful that people would be really interested in reading up more about, feel free to pop any links or documents into the chat box as well for our delegates. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll do so. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to then pass to our next speaker, Dion Ewan, Manager Circular Economy at Royal Arend. Dion is Sustainability Manager at Royal Arend, one of Europe's leading furniture manufacturers in the B2C market. Dion holds a master's degree in business economics and was co-author of the book Circular Route, a research on strategies for a circular business model. Sounds really exciting. So Dion, with that, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I will share my slides. If I may, let me see. Oh, share screen. Yeah, there we go.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
So as mentioned, I work at Royal Arend. We make furniture, and actually we are not in the B2C. It was my own mistake in my bio, but we are in the B2B business, which is slightly different, I think, also from the perspective of how you produce your products and how your customer wants to use your products. So I will share a little bit about with you about my, let me see, yes, about our vision on closing the loop for furniture. We do this with Value Hill. It's a model created by the Circle Economy. It's a Dutch organization where actually at the left, you start with designing your product, you extract raw material, then you produce your parts and you produce the product. You assemble the product and then you distribute it to your customers. In our case, this is business to business, but it could also be for business to consumer, of course. So everything basically starts with circular design, the materials you use and how you produce your products. And then the goal is to keep the value of these products for as long as possible on top of the hill. Like mentioned previously, for example, with sharing models, but also in our case, service models. So we also offer leasing for our furniture. So you can have a prescription for office furniture or furniture for schools, for example. And then we do also, we remain the ownership, but we also do the maintenance and repair of the products. And maintenance and repair is also a service that we offer, of course, to make sure that the product just is optimally used, but also that the quality stays as high as possible. And then you slightly go downhill maybe because a customer doesn't really want to use our furniture anymore. And maybe somebody else wants to reuse it. So then we redistribute it to other customers. So we take back the furniture, redistribute the furniture. Or maybe if something is broken, the product needs some updating, we do some refurbishment, but it also then we redistribute it again and it goes uphill again. So the whole aim of this model is basically to keep uphill as long as possible, but also to focus on reuse and refurbishment rather than recycling. Was also mentioned previously, right? So we don't have to really focus on the recycle part. Where we see what we see right now also with our customers is that there's often a really big focus on can your product or the material, can it be recycled? And this is the very last step we want to take. So we really want to promote to reuse and refurbish the furniture. Also, because when we look at the circular economy in perspective to the whole climate discussion, so the climate agreement we have, the biggest carbon footprint impact of the whole product production is basically the raw material extraction and the material production in parts. So these two steps are the most hazardous steps in the whole chain. So if we can eliminate that by reusing the products for a very long time, then we also know that we can cut carbon emissions within the product if we use it for a longer period of time by up to 90%. So we have done a lot of studying also on carbon footprint in the products and the environmental impact. And this is basically the catch of the circular economy that everybody needs to know and also be willing to adopt, because I think that's the really also the link between the circular economy and the climate debate that we have. And also mentioned, I think a really important part here for us, it was the starting point was to optimize our factory. So we started in the 1990s by using less, so being more energy efficient, using less water, less gas for heating, for example, for our processes, but also heat recovery in our processes to use it in other processes in our factories. So we really started with the environmental focus, and then we we shifted towards how can we make our products more sustainable. And the first thing we did is basically to assess what products do we have right now and how can we improve our product. So what we do is we do a gap analysis of what's the goal we want to achieve with the next product and how can we improve it. So use, for example, less materials or make the connections easily accessible so that we can refurbish, for example. So there's a lot of ways to look at circular design. So I will deep dive a little bit more on how we look on what our aim is on circular design and what our focus is. So I think a really important part for us is that we design all our products in families to make the parts exchangeable, but also to make sure that we can keep the materials at high level in use for a longer time. So if the products are really designed for disassembly and adaptability, we can create chairs. The chairs at the left are made out of the same parts that the chairs on the right of this picture are made of. So we have a family of products with shells and a bases for the chairs, but also all the connection parts. Everything is in one family, so it's really easy to exchange parts between these chairs, so we can easily also adapt it. And what we see in furniture, of course, and that doesn't go for all products, but in our case, a design of a room is also a really big thing. So what we see for offices, for example, within Europe, but also globally for our customers, is that they sometimes they want to have a new look and feel in the office, or new colors, or just a new style. And it doesn't really, they don't have to change the furniture because the furniture is technically broken. Most of the time, the furniture technically is still fine. And I think that goes for a lot of products, that we don't want to use it anymore because we want something new, but maybe the product is still fine. And I think that's also the thing with the circular economy, that we are now in our journey, that we actually take back a lot of furniture from the market, we refurbish it, and it goes back into the market again. And that is the really big step to take. But the first step for us was then to create a circular design of the products, because what we see is if it takes a lot of time to refurbish a product, you have to do everything manually, so nothing is automated, especially in our case. So if we need to reupholster, for example, chair, we have to take off the upholstery of the chair, we reupholster it, and it's all manual, so a lot of labor goes in. And that's also a really positive thing. So I think also from what we see is that we have a lot of local employability to do all these handling of the refurbishment of the product. But still, if we need a lot of time, then it's too expensive to do the refurbishment. And then our customers would say, okay, I would like to purchase new because it's cheaper. And that's, of course, not the case. So the circular design and how easy it is to disassemble the parts and make a product as good as new, that's really the catch to make it also economically viable to refurbish or reuse the products for a longer time. So what we did is also to assess our products. And what you see is here a desk chair. The one at the left is the same as the one at the right. But what we do is we eliminated glue completely from the process. So what's usually within furniture is that the seating part, the foam and the upholstery are glued together to make, it's easier and it's cheaper to do so. But we created a connection in where no glue or no staples or whatsoever was used. So we can easily take off the upholstery and reupholster the chair, or take out the foam and put new foam, and then the chair is as good as new. And as mentioned previously, the biggest impact is in using the materials for a longer period of time. So if we can make sure that the biggest parts of the chair are reused, then we can cut carbon emissions, but also material use by up to 90 or maybe 95%, depending on the product and what we need to adopt. But what we see right now is for tables, for example, it is 40 to 80% less carbon, less materials. But in the case of office chairs, you can go up to 90-95%, because sometimes we only need to refurbish the upholstery and the rest of the chair is just fine. So the environmental impact we can also make with this circular economy is really, really big. And I think a really important part that is not really stressed enough, in my opinion, in the circular economy debate is that we use a lot of materials that are not really designed to be recycled or are not really circular materials, because they contain, for example, glues or other substances that are hazardous to ourselves, but also to the environment. And what we see also a lot of news coming up on the hazardous chemicals that we use in plastics, for example, making it also less viable to reuse the plastic. So what we see, if we want to create a chair part made out of recycled plastics, for example, technically it's really hard because of all the substances that are in plastics right now, because there's so many types of plastics, making it really hard to recycle it at high quality. But also what we know is that in the past we used a lot of materials that were okay, and now we find out that it's not great if we want to use it in recycled materials. So what we do is we do a lot of assessments on materials. We have a lot of requirements also that our suppliers have to follow up, and we follow the cradle to cradle design approach. Cradle to cradle, it is a certification scheme, but everything on the certification is also accessible through the website of Cradle to Cradle. You can also just learn from the approach and use the approach rather than not really doing the full assessment or whatsoever. But I think the Cradle to Cradle approach really looks into what is the material health and the quality of your materials that you use, because that is also the beginning of the circular economy, by eliminating the toxins and hazardous chemicals in our products. And I think there are too many hazardous chemicals around us that are also really cheap to produce, unfortunately. From a product design perspective, we have a few things that we follow. Lightweight design is a really important one. Less material means less environmental impact. It's as simple as that. So lightweight is really, really an important part. But also using recycled materials when possible is also a typical approach that we use. So for plastics, for example, this is really difficult, but we are now integrating it and also doing a lot of testing, and it is possible, but it needs innovation. So not everything comes automatically, of course, and I also don't believe that as a company you need to do everything at once. Just start somewhere and follow that road, and then just take a new approach or a new innovation or a new material and start using that, because I also believe in just starting somewhere and then it will get you on the road. Eliminate hazardous substances, like I mentioned before, but also not all innovations are better. So for our products, for example, using bio-based plastics, which are plastics made out of plants or agricultural waste, the quality of the bioplastics in our case is not good enough compared to regular plastic. So for us, it is not really a step up if we start using bioplastics, but it might be in your case. So it also really depends on the product and also on the situation, what innovation you can adopt. But I also want to stress that not all innovations that are presented are better or necessarily more environmental friendly, for example, or better recyclable in the end. Like I mentioned before, the material reutilization is really important to us. We are currently also doing a lot of LCA studies, which is life cycle assessment, to research the environmental impact of our products, but also to find out how we can improve the environmental performance. So for example, if you look at this chair, it is made out of plastics, and this typical black chair shell is made out of recycled plastics. And we see that in producing this chair compared to one of virgin plastics, we can reduce the carbon footprint of the product up to 80%. And like I mentioned previously, the biggest impact of the products, which goes for all products, it is in the material extraction phase and in the product part production. So to keep these parts and the products cycling for a longer period of time, there is the environmental impact in the end. And I think some maybe for us important elements is that like I mentioned before, so really the carbon footprint connection to the circular economy. So that's a really big one. We also see that in the business to business business where we are, a lot of our customers, they have carbon emission reduction programs. So they also want to know what can we do within our offices. So for example, in our case, what can we do with our furniture? So also the circular economy really helps us to also help our customers to reduce their embodied carbon within their offices. Social benefits, a really important one for us is also the local employability. So if we have all these circular products everywhere, in the past we just sold them and we never saw them back. And now 10 years ago, we started with leasing, take back programs and everything. And also we opened a warehouse location where we take back the furniture and we redistribute them. Of course, if something is in Africa, for example, we don't want to ship it all back to the Netherlands. So I think there's also a really big social benefit of local employability to collaborate with our partners to do refurbishment locally, but also opportunities, I think, for companies that are not even in our network, but do refurbishment of furniture locally. And we see that also, that is that the service-oriented companies and the craftsmanship, that is a really important one within the circular economy. And I think that has a really big, within what we see in our industry, that has a really big benefits as well. But also from our point of view, but also want to keep in mind is that you have to shift your business from a production focused company, so producing as many products as possible and selling them, shift towards the service company and also providing the, in our case, remanufacturing, the maintenance, the repairs, the take back, the logistics. So we have a whole new service focused business that is completely new to us. So 10 years ago, we wouldn't even think of having all these services in-house or with partners, for example. But this is a completely new shift to us. And I think also in the circular economy, we have to shift our focus from material and products related businesses to how can we actually provide the service, just mentioned also in the previous presentation. How can we make sure that we have the most value? And also, yes, always my opinion is to start anywhere. Nothing is perfect. It's really easy to look at other companies or other people having initiatives and trying to make their business better. Nothing is perfect at once. So I really believe in just start anywhere, and it will get you on the road and get you also learning what doesn't work, because that's also something we see. So some things don't work, some things work. So it's a journey and a really interesting one. So thank you for your for listening.
Thanks very much for that, Dion. I see a lot of very positive comments in the chat box around the business model. And I'll have a squiz now if there's anything in the Q&A. I think my take-home message from this one is innovation is not necessarily better, which is a really important one to remember that.
Yes.
And anyway, we could have a whole long discussion around that. I think, my question that I have before popping into the chat box is really how you got the business model, the financial model of this right. Because very often when you speak to people, they'll say, well, if I buy it, then when I don't need it anymore, I can sell it and I can get money back. And very often we see that sharing model, sort of rental or leasing models aren't always competitive financially. Sometimes it works out more expensive. So how did you get that right to make the consumer want to go with a rental model as opposed to just buying it?
Yeah, so I think what's a really important one is that the leasing model, it is not a financial model. So what we see also, if you only perceive it as a financial model to not buy but have monthly payments, for example, then it might not be interesting. But all the service around it, so you don't have for example, you don't have to warehouse or store your furniture if you don't need it. And what we see with a lot of customers they have storage places full of furniture. Well, why is it there? We want to take it back, and then we can redistribute it, because what we see right now, if we take back furniture within a couple of months, it's somewhere else, because there's always a demand for furniture, but somebody needs to take the orchestrating function, right, to direct everything in the right direction. And we have the overview because we have the customers also demanding. So what we see when you perceive it from like only a financial perspective, then it might not be more interesting. What we do see is that if we have a multiple sale or multiple lease for a product, we can lower the prices. Like you also mentioned, right? It's more accessible. So for example, if we produce a chair for 50 euros, let's say, and we sell it for 70, so then we have a 20 euro margin, but we can also spread it out over 2 or 3 life cycles. Then we can adjust the payments and also the leasing, of course. So I think that's really the key, that you don't want to earn your money in the first stage, but you can spread it out over multiple sales, basically. I think I think that's really the key to look at it. Yeah.
I think certainly from a South African or a developing country perspective, the financial model would be critical because, you know, for us, cost is critical. So a business is really going, I mean, you know, many of our businesses now are really sort of tinkering on a knife's edge in terms of financial sustainability. So it would have to make good business sense to go that route. But I see there's a comment from Evans in the chat box. She says refurbishment must be the focus instead of recycling. So definitely on the same page there. And, you know, the wonderful thing for me is that I just think about all the skilled labor, but kind of the trade, the craft labor that you're using to not only manufacture but repair. And for me, there's just so much opportunity in that space in South Africa, where we have people with skills who can't find jobs. But, you know, how do you bring them into this repair model? But also then you've got people that are delivering furniture, collecting furniture. It's just, as you said, a very labor-intensive approach. So a really wonderful model. I'm going to need to pass on to the next speaker now. But Dion, please do have a look at the comments in the Q&A, and you can either respond to some of those now, or we'll take them at the end of the afternoon session. Thank you very much. Wonderful. So with that, we're now going to move slightly from the manufacturing space into the agriculture space. And I'm going to pass over to our next speaker, who's Perrine Hevergruer. Perrine is an international business lawyer who, after stints in Tokyo and Hong Kong, was looking for self-sufficiency for her family. She started a farm in Normandy, applying permaculture principles. Today, the farm is a research center for agroecology and permaculture. Perrine now spends her time as a trainer and consultant training people on other farms. Sounds like an absolutely wonderful initiative, Perrine. So we're very excited to hear more about it. I'm going to pass over to you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you very much for this event, because I think we do need this type of events more often wherever we are in this world, either in Europe or in Africa. So I'm sharing my screen now. Hopefully it works for you. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the farm. I would have loved to invite you all in our beautiful Normandy, but I believe in terms of carbon footprint, that would have been terrible. So I've added a few presentations so that you can share a little bit of our paradise here in Normandy. So this farm we've created in 2006 is a very small scale farm, what we call a micro farm. It's only 20 hectares, and among those 20 hectares, we grow food only on something like 4,000 square meters, which is absolutely ridiculous when you talk about farming. To give you an example, the farm is 20 hectares wide, and a regular conventional farm around us is rather 120 hectares. See, something very different. In fact, this farm is very atypical because the initial project was very atypical in that sense that we wanted to recreate somehow a family scale agriculture place with no fossil fuel. That was one of our conditions at first. We already had in mind that the peak oil was on, and our society could not keep on living on to produce food, which is terrible when you think about it. You have so many oil-related calories in your plates on a daily basis that it's absolutely against common sense to keep on producing food that way. So we were seeking also to revive edible sceneries, like in the old time. You have the French Brittany on this picture, and that was kind of our dreamland somehow. So it was somehow very old-fashioned. But at the same time, we wanted to mix together old-fashioned farming and the most recent scientific discovery. And that's what we did on our farm. So small-scale farming, here you've got the heart of the farm. This is a drawing that we've made just to show how designed a farm can be, completely the opposite of those wild pieces of field that we see nowadays on large-scale farming territories. So that's where we started. That was really a pasture. There was nothing there. It was not a farm. In fact, it was just grass for cows, because you might know that in Normandy we love cows. And that's how it is something like 10 years after the first picture. So, of course, we've done a lot of work to implement all this. We've been designing, as we say in permaculture, all the gardens. We rather talk about gardens when we talk about our farm, more than it's rather the reduction of a big garden, of a small, no, it's rather, it's not the reduction of a big farm, sorry, it's rather the enlargement of a big private garden, in fact. And thanks to permaculture principles and the fact that we've implemented them on our daily work, we've managed to recreate somehow some micro ecosystems here and there on the farm. And those ecosystems do interact with each other. And as you can see on the picture, we tend to focus very much both on the soil and also on water collection. So you could say, well, water collection, what for? You mean you in Normandy, you've got a lot of rainfall, but still water is an obsession, and I believe it shall be an obsession for every single person who wants to produce food on this planet for the coming years. Wherever you are in South Africa, in Normandy, every single thing you shall think when you design a farm, when you conceive a farm, is water. Where is it located? How shall I keep it in my soil? How shall I provide it to my crops, etc., etc. So we've created, of course, a lot of ponds, because in the old time, people used to create ponds, but we've forgotten about those. So we filled them up when we started to build roads and all those very modern stuff. But we went the other way around. We try to re-implement what the people in the old time had implemented, and that modernity had completely erased from time to time. So we've created mandala gardens. So as I mentioned in the beginning, not only the environmental performance of the farm is important to us, of course, the economical performance of the farm is tremendously important. We're going to come back to this later, but also the aesthetic of the farm is important. It is important for people who will come and visit. So you can make quite a good income somehow to be inspiring people, to be teaching people, but also it is very important to live among beauty, because it is really a tough job. I mean, farming, especially growing vegetables or working at the vegetable farmer, market farm, is very, very difficult. So on a daily basis, when you need to refuel in terms of human energy, somehow beauty can be one of a very good source of it. So this is the mandala garden. Again, see, trees are everywhere. Water collection is everywhere. Everything is thought according to Mother Nature rules. So somehow we've been using biomimicry on the farm. We've been watching how a natural ecosystem, when I mean by natural ecosystem, would be an ecosystem that has been left untouched by human hands. And when you look at those ecosystems and you understand the way they work, well, it's the perfect lesson for you to implement on a very natural farm. See the scenery that we have also, which is quite beautiful in this Normand Valley. So again, the focus on soil and the design is very important to make sure not only we're going to produce a lot, but also we're going to be keeping a healthy soil and therefore extremely good biodiversity on the farm. Actually, the biodiversity that we have now is far better than the one that was there when we first implemented the farm in 2006. So we are very, very proud of this, this progress. This is a design again, And this is how it looks nowadays. Again, lots of green. See all the fields up the pictures and down are the neighbors' fields. Actually, they are pastures. And you can tell in spare time how completely brown they are, how completely dry they are, because that was the time of a very severe drought. And see at the heart of the farm how we managed to keep it green, and therefore production is always healthy and always very generous. So there were sheep, so of course we do produce vegetables. That's our main crop, but just like farms in the old time, we tend to mix all types of productions, both vegetables and animals, because we believe that they are very their interaction is the best advantage you can get in terms of agroeconomical principles. So the farm really became an agro-silvopastoral intensive system. It's highly intensive, even though we do everything by hand. Therefore, our carbon footprint is very low and we lose as less oil as possible. But still, one may think that nowadays, if you don't use a tractor, if you don't use oil to produce large amounts of food, well, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make a living out of it. We've managed to prove exactly the contrary. And all this is due to circular economy principles applied to the farm. And again, I'm not going to talk here about circular economy because all the principles are fully embedded in permaculture principles. And the three principles that you can see now, they, I guess, were one of the most important ones we had to keep in mind to be as efficient as possible on a daily basis on the farm. So just like in nature, every single element renders several functions, and each important function is fulfilled by several elements, which means we are always closing the loops. I mean, there's no waste. We are not, certainly not in a linear economy, and everything is used by something else, someone else, really closing loop all the time. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I guess everybody knows this. And when we talk about circular economy, you can tell that every single time you're going to put a trend on something, you're going to get more than one advantage out of it. The thing is that people may think that permaculture is a new way of farming, but it is not. It is rather a conceptual system that can be applied to companies, to a school, to any type of system that aim at being economically viable, environmentally friendly, and I would say humanly viable also. The way human beings behave and feel at the heart of the system is very important. It's useless to have something very beautiful, highly productive, if it's too much for the people who work on it, if it's too hard, too tough, if you cannot make a decent living, I would say even a psychic living on it. So permaculture design takes better advantage of all the services rendered by the ecosystems. Therefore, at some point, you put less effort in the work, because if you work with the frogs, if you work with the snakes, if you have more pollinators, if you have more flowers, if you invite biodiversity in the system, instead of chasing it away from it, then you get stronger, you get better, you have less pests, you have less insect eating your vegetables, you have less damages due to any sickness, any fungi or whatever. So the more diversity you insert in the system, the stronger, the better, the more productive the system gets. And to us, this really struck us some years ago when we realized that with this type of system, you are only economically performant if you are environmentally performant. And that really is the condition. And I was mentioning it earlier, but permaculture is really related to biomimicry. All the patterns that nature offers, we try to copy and paste them in the system to make sure that all the interactions between the plants, between the animals, the trees, will render services, and among them will render the service to grow food and to make us more efficient without so much effort, without so many chemicals, without pesticides, without fungicides, without nitrogen even, or the nitrogen that we insert in our crops is only naturally based, like manure or compost or something like this. Also, we use a lot of agroforestry principles. We grow crops among the trees. This is highly, highly important wherever you are, but even more specifically in Africa, I guess you've got to plant trees. And after you've planted the trees, then you're going to have some good crops that will benefit from the trees. And again, we haven't invented anything. We're not that smart, smarter than we are. And in the old time, people had understood all this. They had understood the complementarity between crops and trees. And we're trying to re-implement these common sense principles in our fields. Here we go again, crops among trees. So I mentioned the fact that we were highly productive, but it is certain that all the externalities that we get from this type of system are huge and shall be, if not monetized, they shall be valorized, because on a small scale farm like this one, I mean, you create employment, you create dynamic in the territory, you improve biodiversity, you insert more beauty in the landscapes, you strengthen food security, you generate social ties. Of course, you store carbon in the soil, and thanks to the trees, and also you create abundant quality food for the community. So to us, it is very important, especially nowadays, when in Europe we're talking a lot about food crisis, because everybody's saying, oh, be careful with the war in Ukraine, food crisis is going to come. Everybody's thinking about the wheat problem, but frankly speaking, it is not an issue. The issue is going to be the price, because the wheat keep on producing it either in France or elsewhere. But farmers will tend to sell the wheat with higher price if they can on the market, so that they make a better income. So we're not going to lack food. We're going to have a price issue that may create a lack of food. But in fact, we all know how to grow food. We know how to do it properly. If we want to do so, it's possible. And we've proven this. A lot of engineers have come to the farm some time ago, and we've proven that on a very small scale, that like the one we have on the farm, we can make a very decent income with a pretty average workload. During the study, we've showed that if a farmer has a weekly workload of average 40 hours per week, then the income might be up to 1,571 euro per month, which is very decent for Europe for farming. It's even more than the average, even for people who grow fruit or wheat with tractors. So we were very proud of this. And we think that all these types of farms shall be implemented everywhere in the territories. Now that we are talking about food sovereignty, now that we're talking about climate change a lot, people finally understood what it was all about. We need this phenomena, we need this wave to expand. And now I'm not working personally on the farm anymore, as you mentioned, because I want to try and enhance the phenomena. So I try to give advice to farms here and there in Europe, of course, in France, but even all around the world. Well, I try to be cautious with my carbon footprint, but still. And this is a book we've written. It's a 1,000 pages book based on all the techniques we've implemented on the farm. And I'm very happy to say that it's going to be released in English next September. So hopefully all the resources, all the techniques we've been using will be available for everybody all around the world. And whatever the type of climate you are in, all the principles are applicable, because if you understood properly, in fact, we are implementing nature principles in a food producing system. So either you are in Africa, in the US, in France, in China or Japan, wherever you are, you try and observe whatever's happening around you, you copy and paste and try to dream about a more beautiful system that can be highly productive. And I think I'm done. Sorry, I went too fast because I knew I had such a few minutes to talk about all this.
I think, Perrine, we could spend an entire afternoon just delving into this particular one. It's incredibly exciting to see what you've done. And I just, that aerial photo, I think, is always going to stick with me when I see just how rich the biodiversity is on that farm. And then you look at those barren farmlands around it.
And the water collection should be really an obsession.
Absolutely. And I think in addition to all of the benefits that you've mentioned, the one for, regenerative farming that excites me is that in South Africa, we have so many youngsters leaving our more rural provinces to come to the big cities to find jobs and then end up living in poverty in, informal settlements in our big cities, when initiatives like this should be rolled out in our rural provinces to keep people, in those areas, to grow food, to ensure food security, improve livelihoods. I think, again, it comes back to my point around the social development opportunities. I just see so much application for this, not only in South Africa, but Africa as well. And we're looking forward to that 1,000-page book being in English.
Soon, very soon.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask you as well. I see there's some wonderful comments in the chat box. How inspiring, beautiful. So some very positive comments in the chat box. Have a look at those. Have a look at the Q&A to see if there are any directed to you. But I'm going to have to now move on to our next speaker, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Our next speaker is Nonhlanhla Joy, who is the founder and CEO of Umgibe Organics. Nonhlanhla is a multi-award-winning farmer, social entrepreneur, food security activist, and, as I mentioned, CEO of Umgibe Farming Organics. I know that Nonhlanhla was affected by the British Airways cancelling of flights, which meant that she almost missed the webinar this afternoon, but I was pleased to see that she was online and joining us. So Nonhlanhla, if I think, Perrine, if you can stop sharing your screen on your side.
I'm sorry.
And we can pass it over to Nonhlanhla. No worries. We didn't see anything we shouldn't have. Nonhlanhla, are you there? Can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, there you are.
I'm afraid. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I'm late, and I'm sure I've missed a lot of wonderful things, but I did get what the previous speaker was saying, and I was very happy about a lot of things, including the 1,000-page book. I'm looking forward to it. Having said that, I am Nonhlanhla Joy. I'm from Umgibe Farming Organics and Training Institute. In 2014, I found myself without food because I was sick. I was diagnosed with cancer and I was frail, and I could not provide for my family and for myself. With the medical bills and everything, things were looking very gloomy. However, I remembered that when I grew up, my mother and my father used to farm. So I started a small garden in my backyard. You'll have to bear with me. I have to tell this story because it's the reason I'm here today. The chickens from the neighbors came and ate everything on site. I was devastated and I had to think on how to actually grow vegetables without the chickens reaching them. So I created something that I today call Umgibe growing system, which was made out of a few planks and plastic bags. I put the seedlings in there. I had 400 rand between me and my poverty, but it worked. And before long, I had vegetables. I was able to feed my family. And I looked around and I realized that I was staying in Mayville, I was staying in Ketomena, where poverty resides. When you talk about food insecurity, people describe it in many ways. However, they don't know the type of food insecurity that resides in Ketomena or other places similar to that. People sleep without food. People sleep without food and wake up without food and stay the whole day not knowing where their next plate is coming from. Sometimes we say food security is eating, but not eating nutritious food. But there, it's a daily thing. Kids are malnutritioned. But coming back to my story, I found out that half the time when you've got a problem as big as food insecurity, we are part of the solution, the ones that are going through that. So I gathered some people, we started working on planting vegetables, and I sold my vegetables. I remember I got 13,500. And that was a small amount of money from what I had been doing, but it was the biggest amount of money for me there and there. And I knew that I would like other people to have the joy that I felt on the day when I took things that were supposedly thrown away, like plastic bags, like blanks, and made something out of it and made a growing system. The system helped because I was frail. I could not stand up properly and for a long time, but I could sit and still nurse my garden. That was for me a secular economy. I did not stop there. The remnants from my vegetables were turned into a worm tea so that I could again put it back into these what we call plants that I was growing. Today, I'm working with over 159 cooperatives, and each family is able to actually live on fresh, organic vegetables. We practice in our farm regenerative farming. We practice permaculture. We practice all the farming systems that allows a person to use the small resources that they have, because farming has become very expensive. with the mechanization of things, some people are not able to even do a little bit because there is so much that is needed from them, which is why now people are looking like they are lazy because they cannot afford the inputs that are needed. And each and every year, these things increase and the soil deteriorates. But with these farmers, we are able to actually start the value chain from the beginning. There are those who are responsible for seeds. We are creating seed banks so that people can be able to reuse, not to buy every time they want to plant something. So we've got seed banks, we've got kids as young as 2 years old, learning about the soil, loving the soil. In schools, in crèches, we are teaching these kids to be able to germinate their own seedlings. And we buy them back, thereby teaching them that it pays to actually take care of the soil, to take care of something, and it teaches them accountability. So our circular economy is not only based on the financial part of the things, it's based on circulating also the information, passing the baton to the next generation. Our motto is that when we are teaching these youngsters, we are cultivating the future. Because let's face it, I'm old now. I don't know how long I've got to live. However, if I am teaching these youngsters at an early age, responsibility, accountability, and knowing that being in this world is no one's what you call responsibility, but for yourself. There are stages in life, and if we teach them that we are actually cultivating the circular economy part, but the economy of the mind, the economy of us as humanity, of knowing what causes climate change, what needs to be done with the ecosystems that we find already existing in where we plant. Because half the time, people are spraying the insects, the biodiversity is destroyed, and they don't understand that we are the invaders, not necessarily the insects that we find there. But if we leave things for them, when we are clearing the little bit that we want to use for planting, we will be able to coexist. We would be able to coexist. At the same time, the soil will remain rich and we will be empowered as human beings, and to also reduce the damage that is being done by everything that people do. Agriculture is the biggest culprit on climate change, and we are complaining. Recently, at floods destroying a lot of the crops. However, as much as I was devastated, I knew that somehow I played some bit of contribution into making those floods, that climate to change the way it has changed these days. In our farm, we practice circular economy. As I said, we have got seed banks, we've got a seedling nursery that produces the type of heirloom, what we call vegetables and crops that we want in our garden. And then we've got people that are responsible for growing. They just grow things, and then we collectively sell together, and we are addressing the continuum. In our space, we've got this continuum whereby we've got the survival people, we've got the people that are what we call subsistence, and then we've got people that are earning a livelihood, the livelihood, and then and then those who want to commercialize and who have got land, because most of our rural farmers has got a lot of land that they can. We've got other women growing yams, amadumbe, and we have also worked on that and to making sure that we make different things that are made out of amadumbe, because they've got this nutrition that you cannot find anywhere. We do that. We take all the ugly vegetables, we make juices, we make sauces, we make everything that is going to make it possible for that farmer who did not harvest the beautiful vegetables to be able to do something about it. We are all about taking from the soil, but also putting back to the soil, because it's the way it was supposed to be. Disturbing the ecosystem is what has landed us as the world, Africa and everyone else, as the what called facing these torrents of rains, these climate changes, and everything, and the food insecurity as well. Because right now, a person who's sitting in the rural area thinks that they cannot produce food because they cannot be able to have the inputs. But if we do it the correct way, if we teach them that the olden way is the good way, because we had people who had never gone to school before. My parents were not educated. However, they knew each and every season. They knew what time to plant and when. We had rains that we waited for, that we knew they were guaranteed to come. We knew that when we had the mealies and when it's been harvested, we will let the cows and the cattle to walk there so that they can be able to dump their what you call the compost, and it created the compost for us, and together with the mulching was there, and everything was fine. That is what we are practicing now. We are busy forming round tables in the rural areas so that we can be able to again regenerate the spirit of farming responsible. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Nonklankla. I think one of the words that I'm seeing so often appear in the chat box today is this word inspiring. And it's certainly with your comments that you've made now about what you're doing with Umgibe Organics has come up again time and time again. It's really inspiring the work that you're doing. And I think for me, the take-home message from your comments this afternoon is that we can't forget that at the heart of the circular economy is people and community. And you working so closely, you know, this was something small that you started, you know, for a need, but it's spilled over now into helping your community, helping others put food on the table. And it really is inspirational, the work that you're doing. I've popped the website, the web address for Umgibe Organics up into the chat box, and I encourage people to go and have a look at the great work that you're doing. And really thank you so much for your inspiring comments. I think what we really need to be looking at now is how do we replicate this? How do we scale this? How do we take this approach to other people in South Africa to practice the same kinds of things and to learn from the incredible work that you've done? So thank you so much, Nonklankla.
Thank you.
With that, then, I'd like to pass over to our last speaker for this afternoon. Martijn van Engelen is the CEO and founder of SNU, a Dutch company specializing in circular ICT equipment. They buy back old equipment, refurbish it, and then sell the equipment at a fair price. Since 2018, SNU has also been active in Ghana to give the local population easy access to ICT equipment. SNU makes it easy for companies to become more circular. Martijn, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Very much. I'll share the screen immediately. So there we go. Yeah, so, that's good. Sorry. Not the way that would work. Thank you very much. My name is Martijn, founder of SNU, and I will show you my passion, which I have in turn to a business concept. We keep raw materials in use. I will show you now our movie.
Sorry, Martijn, I see it's not in full screen mode. I'm not sure if you're able to pop it in.
Let's see if I can do that.
Maybe just hit the F5.
F5. Does not respond, I think. No, that will not pop up.
No, that one's not working.
I'm sorry for that. I'll show you now.
It's we just still see all the slides.
A planet with more than 7.5 billion inhabitants. All
No, we can't see your video, unfortunately.
What? Hold on. Let me pop it again. Is it now full screen?
No, not yet.
Still not?
No, still not.
Why it's not working on full screen? Oh, I want this better. There we go. There we go. Now should it be full screen?
No, still not.
One moment.
Unless other people can see it in full screen, but Carrington says try stop sharing. Wait, I just lost Carrington's comment in the chat. Try stop sharing and share again the presentation. I don't know if that'll help.
That will do.
Or someone else said if you use multiple screens, it shows the. Oh wait, there we go. Oh.
Yeah. Okay, komen. You have komen? No. No.
It was, and then it disappeared.
Yeah. Now let me check. Now.
This is our Earth.
No, still not.
Why is it
Could Matthew maybe share it instead? Would that be an idea?
Does Matthew have the presentation?
Ik krijg full screen met de presentatie.
Maybe Martijn, if you can.
We try now. Is this? Dat had ik net ook.
It's a film. Bedoel je film? De
No,
presentatie is nou full screen.
Is this presentation now full screen?
No.
It's in the full screen. Stop share and then nog een keer openen.
I think Matthew has it, so we can share it on our side if need be.
I think this should be it. Is this better?
Okay, perfect.
Yes,
Great.
Thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience. Now the movie.
This is our Earth, a planet with more than 7.5 billion inhabitants, all of which consume. In 2100, there will be nearly 12 billion. Earth has a problem. The raw materials are running out. In 20 years' time, over 30% of all raw materials will disappear. Due to the enormous consumption society, there are more and more innovative products being manufactured without really thinking about these depleting resources. With the growing population on Earth, this could have catastrophic consequences, even though there is enough on the waste yards to fill this for decades. This is Martijn. Martijn is the CEO of SNU, and he has a tremendous vision and passion. A vision and passion for the return of the raw materials that we have borrowed from the Earth, and to empower disadvantaged people on Earth as well. Martijn developed a unique and circular model in which raw materials of existing equipment can be reused rather than disposed of. SNU, like as new. Normally, end-of-life equipment is immediately recycled, which is not necessary and even burdens the Earth. SNU works with its 3R concept, which stands for recollect, reuse, recycle. We first identify the equipment precisely and filter it for reuse. After that, reusable equipment is refurbished and is perfectly reused as new. And unusable equipment is dismantled and reduced to raw materials which are used again. Only when the equipment cannot be reused anymore, they will be recycled and will be brought back to raw materials. This makes it a full circle and will prevent the depletion of raw materials and a massive e-waste problem. SNU is therefore a vital part of the supply chain. Cooperation with all the links of the supply chain and the creation of sustainable partnerships are most important at SNU. With our expedition, we pick up your telecom and IT equipment from your place. In our sorting facilities in Belgium and the Netherlands, we refurbish the equipment for a second life. Here we make proper use of a workshop for people with disabilities for whom the labour market is inaccessible. In this way, they have the opportunity to function in society in a rewarding way. As a SNU customer, you can be totally carefree in this process. You will receive a clear overview of the submitted equipment, so you can see exactly what has happened to your hardware. In addition to this, you will receive a fair price. Besides this, you are actively helping to contribute to solving the global resource and waste problems. You cannot imagine a better CSR implementation. Still, there's more. The perfectly as SNU equipment is also deployed appropriately by SNU in developing countries, because it is our passion to give disadvantaged people access to IT, internet, and thus education. With this, you support the United Nations goals to have the world of extreme poverty resolved by 2030. For you, this means a unique CSR plus implementation at once. What could be better than to use your recycled equipment to keep the Earth and the next generation safe? Is it already in your corporate DNA? Stop e-waste. Join Martijn. Join SNU. This is our Earth. In 20 years, the raw material problems will be resolved. Signed, SNU.
Yeah, you have seen the business model in the story. As we do extend, don't let anything very going to waste. We give IT and telecoms a second life. We keep telephone exchange alive, also IT equipment for running on the production level. We believe that refurbishing is better than for the environment than recycling, and we give people from a distance from the labor market also a fair chance. As we extend the IT second life, the real value of the goods create prices, but also create positive impact. But also very important is provide professional services for hardware and software. It's about a life cycle extension where you only not do the refurbishment, but also do the operational certainty that the hardware can be on functionality. For example, we can do device as a service. You don't want to own the product, you want to use it. That's why you pay per month a fee. And that's why it's so important to make create market accessibility and create a waste-free society. What kind of products do we do? Name laptops, desktops, smartphones, servers, high professional equipment for ministries. You can think we can provide it. But not only the product will we do refurbishment, but also we can extend the life cycle on the local premises. And also we create, of course, a new market. Also, we have developed our own software systems called Reuse. And this software generates data for lifecycle management, but also for CSR key figures, like CO2 reduction, raw materials, social innovation. You can not imagine we can create also the circular data, where we can make positive impact on the environment, but also can create the CSR key figures, which is more benefit for our community and our society. And of course, very important is to reduce the CO2 reduction worldwide. But also the social opportunities we strive on. Here in the Netherlands, we have 50% of our people have a distance of the labor market. And we try to create equal chances for everybody. And especially what we also do in Ghana, we try to make equal chances for everybody. Creating market accessibility for the ICT equipment, including a good product lifecycle management, and strive to a waste-free society. Because everything and everybody is valuable. And we get closer to the solution for the e-waste problem, because we believe that the e-waste problem is being created by a poor service level locally in the market and having no waste and recycling facility in a local market. That's why this collection of end-of-life equipment also in African countries as well as in Europe is very important. And that's how we can close the loop. We saw it in the presentation of Ireland. They do the same, and we strive to do the same even in emerging markets. But also sharing knowledge and training is very important. We have to upgrade the service level, especially in emerging markets, where we can create a new labor market, and we can share knowledge and strive again for a waste-free society. Company Ghana, my colleague Evans is also joining this webinar, Evans Guaya, and we have set up the company Ghana in 2018, and where we create market accessibility for ICT equipment, including a recycling facility. We are going to build a multi-tech center where I've learned to establish business in a major market is necessary to create back for entrepreneurs. And what I'm trying to say is, if we want to set up a good circular economy in the emerging markets like Africa, it's very important that the African countries help the entrepreneurs with a back office. And the back office, what I'm trying to say is create lawyers, local accountants, good partners to create a back office to help the entrepreneur to create his business model, so we can have more access to the local market and strive for good business. And of course, I said earlier, we strive to have a waste-free society. If we trade products in, we trade end-of-life equipment back with an exchange premium. And so we can keep up the raw materials are then a part of the circular process. I want to create a multiple functional tech center, where very important is that we create professional services, refurbishment center, upcycling center, and sell the hardware and trade in end-of-life equipment and electronics. So the waste mountain will be shrimping. About the projects, our project plan is at the moment a finance facility from 1 million. But getting finance for this is very difficult. Nowadays, even in the EU, is it difficult? And let's say that in Africa is very difficult. Everybody is waiting what's happening worldwide. And one of the things I want to give me, if you want to build good circular economy in the African market, a backbone of a good back office for helping entrepreneurs is very important. So we can help entrepreneurs with financing, administration, and local laws to help them to get the business running. This was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, of course, you can ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martijn, for that. I think certainly it's food for thought in terms of the opportunity that exists in South Africa as well. You know, we sit with, I think it's around 9% of our end-of-life electrical and electronic equipment that is reused or recycled. So much of it is just sitting in people's offices, cupboards, basements, that don't return back into the economy. And I know that one of the biggest challenges is that, you know, government is actually the biggest producer of e-waste in South Africa, and they can't unlock it back into reuse and repair because of this ownership-based model. It's a state asset, and you know, all of the issues that are around that. And the question we've always asked is, you know, why buy the equipment? Why not lease the laptop or lease the cell phone so that at end of first life it can be returned back and it can be repaired? And with that creates so much opportunity for jobs and improved livelihood. So I think it's a significant opportunity for South Africa. It's fantastic to see the work that you're doing in Ghana. I know West Africa faces its own unique challenges with a lot of electronic waste being dumped there from Europe, which doesn't necessarily have, you know, reuse and repair opportunities, and very often is creating more of an environmental hazard than an opportunity. So great to see SNU working in Ghana as well. And yeah, I see Evans has also popped a comment in the chat box as well, saying hi from SNU Ghana. I think that certainly there's been a lot of discussion in South Africa around how we grow the township economy. I think a comment I made earlier is that I think we're seeing a lot of repair happening in South Africa, but it happens informally. And so the question is, how do we integrate those that are working in the space into the economy? How do we provide them with access to better tools, to better infrastructure, to be able to scale up the work that they do? So I think there are a lot of lessons learned from the work that SNU is doing and how we can replicate that as well. Martin, I'd ask you to have a squiz in the chat box and see if there are any particular comments that are addressed to you. From what I'm seeing, some excellent comments as well. Repeated, the one around refurbishment is the way to go. Great idea. Have a look in the Q&A as well to see if there's anything that's addressed specifically to you. But I think in the 4 minutes that we have left, I just want to kind of recap on the session this afternoon so that we don't keep people beyond the 4:30 our time this afternoon. I think it's been an incredibly rich discussion and we've seen some wonderful examples of circular business models. It was intentional in the design of this afternoon's webinar that you wouldn't have seen traditional things like how do we recycle plastic or how do we recycle tires or how do we recycle paper, because we wanted to push your imagination beyond what we in South Africa typically know as the circular economy, that the circular economy is about waste and the circular economy is about recycling. As I said in my opening presentation, we really need to break that idea, that narrow view that is what the circular economy is about. And hopefully from the presentations this afternoon, you've seen more of the opportunity, the wider opportunity that the circular economy provides. We've had examples from CSIR around sharing models. So how could we actually provide people in South Africa with goods and services through a completely different business model, through a non-ownership based business model where they can access things by perhaps, leasing a particular product. We've had examples from the furniture sector, from the ICT sector. We had Royal Arend and we had SNU around a business model that leases a product to a consumer that at end of first life, second life can bring that product back again, keep that product at its highest value through reuse, repair, refurbishment before we then start to look at things like recycling. So again, that different business model idea. And then we've had 2 wonderful presentations around regenerative agriculture, around doing things differently in terms of how we grow food, how we provide food to communities, how we essentially honor, the issues around soil health, around a major challenge facing South Africa in terms of water security. How do we grow food in a different way? How do we create, close the cycles? We've heard around permaculture, around agroecology. We've heard around, taking one waste product from that, around the worm tea that Nonhlanhla mentioned, around taking a waste product from one and reintroducing it as an opportunity back into another. So, the idea was to bring these different business ideas, circular economy business ideas, and share them with you this afternoon to really stretch the imagination. And hopefully this inspires. We've had just over 70 people in the webinar this afternoon. It hopefully inspires you to think differently around the circular economy, to seek out those circular economy opportunities. I always say a lot of this we've been doing in South Africa. We perhaps have never called it circular or called it the circular economy, but a lot of this we've been doing. And the question is, how do we scale this up? And this is the question that we really need to be discussing, I think, going forward. How do we scale? How do we create opportunities for businesses? I've seen some questions around financing. How do we finance these business ideas? How can we get access to finance? Are there regulatory constraints or barriers? How do we create the right enabling environment in South Africa for these businesses to thrive and to grow and to really recreate and rethink the South African economy in terms of the resources that we use, whether it be materials, whether it be water, whether it be energy. Because I think what has been clear, and hopefully those that have joined us this afternoon will take this home as well, is that behind every one of these ideas, there is opportunity for job creation, from labor-intensive, low-skill up to highly skilled people working in this space. And this, I think Gregory made this comment at the beginning with Stats SA just having released yesterday the latest statistics. South Africa desperately needs to address the issue of unemployment. And I do believe that the circular economy provides us with an opportunity to do that through these wonderful new business opportunities, business models, and business ideas. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I'm going to ask everybody that was online if they can quickly just turn on their screens so that we can see all of the speakers all at once. And we can see how many were paying attention. There we go. Fantastic. And from my side as well, a very big thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time. I know that it's also just, before summer in Europe, so you're probably all looking forward to your summer holidays. It's a busy time before people go on their holidays. So thank you so much for making the time this afternoon to share your experience and your knowledge. And certainly we'll be sharing the presentations, we'll be sharing this video with the delegates after this, and maybe there's an opportunity as well for where people might have some follow-up questions. So from my side, thank you. It's been a great pleasure to host the webinar this afternoon and to hear from all of you, and it's been wonderful having so many people join us virtually. So with that, I'd like to close the webinar. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.